Great. Welcome everybody for our speakers today. This talk is called Counseling in Indigenous Communities as a Settler, but it also has Indigenous prayer and reflection shared by Elder Sunni Hill. The speakers include, as I mentioned, Elder Sunni Hill and Carrie Bove, who's a registered clinical counselor. As you can see up there, the flyer's up there for you to see Carrie there. And I'm going to stop my share, Carrie, and allow you to share your screen. And then I'm going to turn my video off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can people hear? Should the volume up or?
Are you ready, Carrie?
I am. Yeah, I'm just going to get my screen shared properly. Hold on one sec. Okay, everyone can see that? Take that as a yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting us into your classroom today to talk about counseling in Indigenous communities as a settler. Thank you, Dr. Betty. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. I'm Carrie Bove, and today I'm sitting in my home office, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. I'm so grateful for their preservation of this land, and my absolute favorite place here is when I'm driving into work from Port Coquitlam to Maple Ridge, and I'm going over the bridge, and I can see the Pitt River snaking up into the most beautiful mountainscape. And every day when I go into work, I just take a deep breath as I'm seeing that and think about how beautiful it is to be here and how happy and grateful I am. So thank you to the Coquitlam First Nations people for your continued land stewardship, for caring for everything that is above and below the water. And I start off in this way, hoping to create a meaningful land acknowledgement, which is really important because otherwise it could be empty or performative. So I like to always place myself within the land and share my experiences on the land as well. Or if I don't have any experience on the land, letting people know that as well. So I'm from Port Coquitlam. My ancestry is St. Lucian, Ukrainian, and French, and our family first settled in New York, and then Toronto, and then Vancouver. I'm a mother of 2 young girls. I'm a partner, I'm a daughter, a sister, an auntie, or as I'm called in my extended Italian family, I'm called a zia. And I'm a counselor, and my most favorite thing to do in the world is travel. And it's important to introduce myself in this way because in some Indigenous cultures, it's a way of connecting and introducing familial ties. So it's a relational way of introduction. It tells people who I am, where I'm from, and who I belong to. So I've been a counselor with Indigenous child and youth mental health now for 8 years, first working in Chilliwack, and now I work mainly in the Tri-Cities and Maple Ridge. I also own my own counseling practice with 2 other counselors. And I'm here today with Sunny, and I'll let Sunny go ahead and introduce herself as well. Thank you, Sunny.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Hi, everyone. It is so good to be here and to share with you, and thank you, Carrie, for inviting me. My English name is Sunni Hill, and I am Haida Jimshian from Haida Gwaii. I come from a matriarch society, and you are either born into the Raven clan or the Eagle clan. And my grandmother was the matriarch of our Yahulanis clan, Raven clan. And what that means is that all of her ancestors on the female side especially, like all her daughters and her children will be ravens. And so I am a raven, and so are my children. And so I have worked with First Nations people all my life. I went on my healing journey when I was 40. They say life begins at 40. For me, I'm so grateful life began at 40. And I was able to heal from the things that had happened in my life, and I believe as First Nations. I work as an elder for the Ministry of Children and Families here in New West, and I don't know, is it the Tri-Cities? Is that what it's called?
Tri-Cities all the way up to Maple Ridge.
Yeah. And also I volunteer at the Spirit of the Children in New West, teaching the 7 sacred teachings. I also volunteer as an elder now for the Aboriginal, Vancouver Aboriginal, where are we? The Transformative Justice, Vancouver Aboriginal Transformative Justice, which I've been volunteering there for 20 years. Yes. So that's who I am, and I'm so glad to be here. I had 3, a son and 2 daughters, and my son has gone to the spirit world, and I have 4 grandchildren, and my oldest is special. He has a chromosome disorder and an autism, and he is ever so special. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. And Sunny's joining me here today, especially because within some cultures, Indigenous cultures, it's important to have the overview of a matriarch, of an elder when we're sharing any information, because they're the knowledge keepers, and they would make sure that I'm sharing the information correctly from what they know. And especially as a settler, there's a real importance around the sentence, like nothing about us without us. So it highlights the importance of having Indigenous people involved in any and all aspects of work that impacts their people. And that includes our talk today. So that's how Sunny's come to join us. So I'm hoping at this time, Sunny could start us off in a good way, which means taking space and time to think about our connectedness and our goals for the gathering. It's likely if we were in person and we were sitting there with you, that might include a meal or a snack. And that's to get us ready and fortify ourselves for the work. And this also grounds our work in togetherness. So Sunny, would you mind starting that way?
Oh, it's a wonderful way to start every day and everything, every occasion that we do. And in Haida, for Creator, we say, and you may say God, and we say Salana. And in my way, I truly believe Creator and Salana are one and the same. Solana, Heavenly Creator, we thank you so much for today. We thank you for bringing us together here in such a good way. And we thank you for our families that we work with, our families, our youth and our children, and all the work that the Indigenous Child and Youth Mental Health team, they work with them. And I'm so grateful for this team that I work with. They are so awesome with our youth. Thank you. Thank you for the mountains and the valleys and the trees on the mountains and the valleys. You created the trees to give us oxygen to breathe. Thank you. We cannot live without the trees. And we thank you that you give us the courage and the wisdom to stand up for our trees when we need to. We thank you for the water. Thank you that we are over 75% water. We cannot live without water. And thank you that you teach us to teach our children to have the courage and the wisdom to stand up to protect our water when we need. Thank you for the plants that feed us, plants that give us our culture, plants that heal us. You have given us enough to thrive while we walk this earth. And thank you that you teach us to know when we have enough and when we don't need it anymore, that we would share what we have to those who do need it. Thank you for those that swim, those that fly, those that burrow, those that crawl. Thank you for the 4-legged, and thank you for the 2-legged. The world can do without the 2-legged, but we cannot do without the world. Thank you for teaching us to be humble, to be honest and respectful, to be courageous, to have courage and speak our truth, whatever that may be. Even in the hard times, that we can speak our truth in a good way, no matter what we have to say. Thank you. Thank you that you give us wisdom, and ask you to just be with each and every one of us today. and help us to just leave here with an open heart and be inspired to want to work with our Indigenous children and youth, all my relations. Amen.
Thank you, Sunny.
Mhm.
Thanks for starting us off in that way.
Yeah.
So today we're hoping to touch upon quite a few things, and I'll do my best to humbly represent this information in the best way that I can. But I do come to this work with my own cultural biases, my own way of understanding the world. So this is my understanding of an Indigenous lens, but it's not my lens. So I do want to highlight that. And I've gotten feedback on the information and the presentation itself from our elder, from community members, and from colleagues. But just because I've checked with a couple Indigenous people does not mean that the information is generalizable or correct for all communities. So I like to think of each person as a culture unto themselves, each with their own individual way of being that are culturally unique. And lastly, we're all learning, and what we know is always changing. So I ask for your understanding, openness, patience, and of course, feedback. And Sunny and I will try to respect your time today and the time of the presenter following us. So we'll do our best to cover this in a really quick and efficient way as well. So I'll be tracking our time, Sunny.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. So we will start at the point of contact because it's impossible not to discuss this when we're talking about counseling in Indigenous communities, because we need to reference that historic and current context that have impacted many Indigenous communities. So there is so much information on the impacts of colonization that it would literally take a full semester or maybe even a full degree to learn everything. So what I do want to be very clear about when we're talking about these things is that the impacts of colonization are not just historic. They're not just in the past. They are current, and they currently continue to impact Indigenous people. But I'm not an expert historian. So I'm just going to give an overview of some of the events that have occurred so that our counseling, when we're doing it, is steeped in that context. So prior to contact, Indigenous people lived awesome, happy, prosperous lives.
Mm-hmm.
After contact, in 1867, the Indian Act took away the rights of Indigenous people in Canada. So one gentleman called it the way to solve the Indian problem. That was Duncan Campbell Scott, who was our Department of Indian Affairs superintendent. One other senior Crown official described it as a policy designed to kill the Indian in the child. So later on, the Indian Act would actually go on to influence apartheid laws in South Africa. And both the Indian Act and Nazi policies in Germany actually alluded to the final solution to the problem. In 1884, potlatch laws banned ceremonies, so it banned people gathering together of 6 or more people. People weren't allowed to practice any of their cultural ceremonies. It outlawed Indigenous people from being able to hire lawyers. It created reserves, which people actually needed written permission to leave. It renamed individuals with European names. There were some places where women would lose status, but men would not in certain circumstances. There was the 60s scoop. There was a residential schools, which the last closure was in 1996. So while I was still going to school, like while I was in high school, there were other people in Canada going to residential schools still. And now we're finding out all the new information about mass unmarked grave sites at these schools. We have the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and we have an overrepresentation of Indigenous people in foster care and our justice system, all of which has amounted to a cultural genocide of Indigenous people in Canada. So again, I'm not an expert. I urge you to learn more about colonization and the impacts of that if you decide to work with Indigenous people in counseling, because there just is so much more emerging information as well. And Sunny, would it be possible for you to share, do you feel comfortable to share a bit about your personal experience of colonization and those impacts?
Okay, thank you. And I'll try to keep it quick too, because we want you to have the opportunity to ask questions. I was born when my mother went to residential school, and all my uncles and aunties and cousins and so many went to residential school as young as 7 years old. And when my mom she went to Cocolita in Chilliwack, and residential school was a horrendous time, a very dark time of our life. And I know there was so much, although I didn't go myself, I know what happened there. And there was so much abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, mental. It was just so much abuse there. And I don't want to dwell on that because I'm hoping that you will look into it too yourself, really look into our history. But I really wanted you to also to know before contact, which was not that long ago, in my grandmother's mother's time, in my grandmother's time. And we have, being a matriarch society, how our family system worked was all of my sisters would be the ones to teach my daughters how to use your hands, how to do things and be in this world. And all of my brothers would be the teachers for my sons on how to do things and use your hands and be really a good human being while you walk this earth. And the grandparents were the teachers of values. They were the ones that taught our children to all the values of being honest, of being humble, to know Creator and be grateful and respectful, and all these good values that they would teach. Every story had a value in it. And as parents, what our parents' role was to love our children, nurture them, clothe them, feed them. And so it wasn't, the saying, it takes a community to raise a child. That's how, I think it came from us, really, honestly. And so our children felt safe, they felt loved, they felt respected, they were happy. There may have been incidences, but that's all they were. And after residential school, they came out, like Billy Diamond said, they went in as innocent children, and so many came out as some of the boys especially, and many of them came out as monsters. And they were told, don't speak. You don't speak about what happened here. You don't hear. You don't see what's going on, and you don't feel. So like Billy Diamond said, he said, when we came out there, residential school, when we left, we didn't do that. We didn't speak. We didn't talk. We didn't feel. We were angry. We were depressed. And then we grew and had children, and our children were the same way. And the grandchildren, they don't talk, they don't speak, they don't feel, they don't hear, and they're angry and they're depressed and they don't know why. It's like, I feel like it's like a curse that's been passed down, the effects of residential school. And there's loss of identity. They were forced to cut their hair. An old dear who is passed now, and he said, we got one week to learn English. And if you were caught speaking your language after that, they would prick your tongue with a safety pin. Who does that to children? And it was like a prison. They were in prison. And so I don't want to say we lost our language. It wasn't our fault. It was stolen from us, right? And so we grew up and of course we weren't nurtured, and that nurturing for our children wasn't there for a lot of us. And so it was just trauma that has been passed from generation to generation. And I know I just finally got my status back, but being non-status, when my mom married my dad, his dad signed his rights away to go to university, to go fight in the war, to do certain jobs, you had to sign your rights away. And so he thought he was doing good, and he did, but I don't think he realized what effect it would have on his future generation. And when my mom married my dad, she became non-status, and we no longer could live in our village. We were not welcome. And I look in the mirror, I remember saying, well, I look like an Indian. I'm old school, so I say Indian, sorry. I look like an Indian, and I just wanted to be with my friends, and I had to go elsewhere. So, yeah, it wasn't a good time. It really was hard. And we'll talk about the resilience when you bring it up.
Okay. Thanks, Sunny. Thanks for sharing that. I do want to say I did ask Sunny prior to this if she would be okay to share that experience. I didn't just spring it on her in the last second or two. That would have been horrible. So thank you, Sunny, for sharing that. And yes, resilience. Indigenous people continue to fight against assimilative pressures and historic oppression. And that looks like taking things back now. So taking back the artifacts that were stolen, especially I love how Sunny uses that word, that were stolen, recovering land, uncovering traditions and ceremonies, protecting their language. There's the real worry around the loss of language now. And some of the research that Chandler and Lalonde have done talk about some of that resiliency, some of the places that, they've been doing well and they continue to do well. And it's because of some of the things they see in those communities. So evidence that particular bands had taken steps to secure their traditional lands, evidence of having certain rights of self-government and having degree of control over education services, police and fire services, health delivery services, having evidence of having created cultural facilities. So whether that looks like a longhouse, sweat lodge, whatever it would be, the participation of women in local government, so bringing back the matriarchy, and the provision of their own child and family services within the community. So not using MCFD, having their own way of dealing with these things. So overall, Indigenous people are incredibly strong and resilient. And at the same time, we still see that intergenerational trauma that Sunny's talking about today as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, I see it as we have gone through a dark period of our time, but we have been here for thousands upon tens of thousands of years, and we are resilient. I'm really grateful to be where I'm at today. I went through a lot myself personally as a First Nation child, and but I've healed. I went on my healing journey, and I healed from the brokenness in my life. And also, one of the things that I wanted just to mention that I was going, okay, I've healed, I've forgiven everyone who has hurt me. But what is this? There's still something there. And that, to me, I realized is that we as a people, as First Nations people, we are grieving. Part of our grieving is that we are grieving culturally. So much was stolen from us culturally, and now we are coming back. We are coming back. We're like a sleeping giant. We were knocked out. I say we were knocked out cold for a while, but now we're coming back and we're being stronger. We're getting educated. We are healing. And we're learning together what was stolen of our culture with us. And we want our youth to be strong. We want our youth to be strong mentally, physically, and spiritually, and emotionally. So we're back. We didn't disappear.
No. Thanks, Sunny. So that was some of the context piece of the history. Again, entire classes could be taught about these things, and I'll encourage you to seek out more information about the cultural genocide of Indigenous people in Canada, and preferably from the source. So looking to Indigenous people to share that knowledge as well, if they're comfortable with doing that. And now we'll move into an area of which I do know a bit more about, which is Indigenous child and youth mental health. So this is where Sunny and I both work. It was created in 2003 as a result of communities asking for more culturally specific counseling that was flexible and understanding of historic and current issues that could be creating barriers for Indigenous people in accessing services. So it uses a framework that's meant to be representative of UNDRIP, of the APPF, of the Truth and Reconciliation Acts, and the clinicians all come to this with their own personal frameworks of working as well, but that is meant to be tied to or married to the way that they're working within an Indigenous framework as well. So I personally come to this work with my training from SFU. So I finished my master's there, which I focused on a narrative and existential way of working in counseling that had that philosophical focus, but it was also embedded in trauma-informed practice. And along the way, I've been fortunate enough to receive training in trauma-focused CBT, DBT, EFFT, and motivational interviewing. I love the work that we do because it's dynamic and it's always changing. And that's why I love counseling in general. Sunny had just the other day talked to me about how important it is to be teachable. And so I felt that really deeply when she said that, because I think that doing this work, especially in counseling, that it's always changing. So we do need to have that flexibility of thought in terms of learning new things. I really enjoy the work because it has the idea that culture and wellness and health may look a bit different from outside of what we expect from a Western approach. So that's pretty cool. And since I started 8 years ago, I've noticed so much change. So say, 8 years ago, like very few people knew about residential schools. And then even like 3 years ago, no one knew about land acknowledgements. So now we have Orange Shirt Day, red dresses, and a growing awareness of Canada's history. And this knowledge becomes more mainstream yearly. So it's becoming more and more something that everyone's knowledgeable about. And at the same time, myths and negative stereotypes about Indigenous people still do continue. I love linking culture to wellness, and that's part of my work. And I also really love this work because it can be uncomfortable. Because as a settler, I have to talk about the privileges that I hold in the world and how that can impact my clients and how that changes the way that I view things and how that I get to walk in the world. So it's always interesting doing that work as well. And there's a holistic practice to Indigenous frameworks. So that's really part of my beliefs in the world as well. And above all, I love working with Indigenous people because I see strength, diversity, pride, a love of culture, and all of that speaks to me in terms of my views of understanding and belonging in the world, and just like how we create meaning in a relational way. So that's why I love the work that I do for ICYMH. And especially I get to do my role as an outreach worker. So I don't work in an office. I actually work meeting people where they are. Yeah. So for many people that we work with, it's a struggle to get to an office-based appointment. There's lots of barriers to being in an MCFD office, especially. So there's fear, there's a lack of transportation at times, not feeling comfortable necessarily with like a traditional face-to-face. So we're working in a way that's like non-conventional. We're meeting people wherever they are. That could be at their school, if they're okay with their school, knowing that they're getting counseling. That could be at a park, that could be at Tim Hortons, that could be at the mall, that could be, I just took someone to a dentist appointment the other day. So that was a way to work with them in a way that I could connect with them. They needed to go to the dentist and I could give them that ride. So there is like an aspect of almost like a youth worker aspect of like just really helping people get where they need to go as well. So it ends up being lots of car therapy. So I do a lot of work in my car, and there's many positive things to doing this. It's low barrier, there's greater access, it's very flexible. But for some people doing certain types of counseling, that might be harder because, for example, like someone who's doing art therapy or play therapy, they wouldn't necessarily have like control of their environment. You can't necessarily bring out like your art therapy tools or your play therapy tools at Tim Hortons. It wouldn't quite work necessarily. Not that those are insurmountable difficulties, because you could still, carry a small pack in your car and then bring it into the schools. But it does make controlling for environment pretty difficult. But I love it because every single day I'm somewhere new. So multiple times a day, I'm meeting people where they are. I'm seeing people's homes. I'm being invited into their homes. I'm getting to go for walks. We do a lot of walk and talk therapy, which I feel like hits a couple highlights all at once, because you get out in nature, you get like some exercise in, and then you're also speaking about what's going on for you. So that's why I love the work that I do. And in terms of the ways in which I'm working in counseling that are different from Western approaches, I really noticed the differences are in relationships and culture.
Mhm.
So there's a way of saying things in Indigenous culture, which is all my relations. So I don't even know. I was going to say, my emails usually say that at the bottom, all my relations, which is an indicator of like that everything is attached, everything is interconnected, everything really means all. So it includes your ancestors, everyone who's come before you. And it just speaks to the interconnectedness and relationship of everything. And that includes the counselor and the client. So it involves bringing yourself to each relationship in a way that was described by a Squamish scholar, Denise Finley, as a messy terrain or a relational vulnerability that reconciliation calls for. So she characterizes it as involved, imperfect, vulnerable, warm, responsive, and moved by others. So that can be really dissimilar than many Western approaches to counseling that very much puts a line between self and other, or counselor and client, in a way that says that we won't impact each other or transfer onto one another. And it kind of guards itself against that. So in relational Indigenous counseling, we're recognizing that there's an impact on each other, and we accept that piece. And that doesn't mean that there's rampant self-disclosure of the therapist all over the place. But it does mean that we're able to share personal characteristics like I'm married or I have children. It can let people know that their story is touching us. So I feel deeply moved by what you just said. So it doesn't mean unloading on your clients, but it does posit that we're all humans and our interactions together will change us. So in other words, it's an ethical, relational way of being in the world, from which an awareness of that interrelatedness of all things guides what we think, feel, say, and do. And Denise puts it lovely. She says, it's inviting imperfection in those around us by connecting through our universal conditions such as birth, death, love, loss, suffering, joy, disappointment, and longing, to name a few. So even in this instance, even though I can't see any of you, so I don't even know what you look like, we're talking and you're listening, and we're impacting each other relationally as we're here. And it's relational and reciprocal. Like, hopefully we will have a second to chat and see your faces later. But we'll be impacted by this conversation and what we share together here today.
Mhm.
Sunny, is there anything you want to add to that piece around all my relations and the idea of that connectedness?
Relationship and connectiveness. I really thank you, Carrie. It's so important with our Indigenous peoples, our youth and our children, because trust is something that has been so broken in us, right? It's been so it's been hard to trust the ministry, say, for example, and so it's good to have a relationship, and that's how we would have a relationship with our youth who may be struggling. Just walk along beside them. We don't really say we have to fix them. We have to acknowledge them and walk beside them when they cry. It's okay. It's good. And if you have a youth or a child coming to those tears, that actually we honor those tears. And we would take their Kleenex and not throw it in the can in the garbage, but we'd actually take their Kleenex and burn them after and say thank you for sharing. And it is so important. We need to know that you have heart, that you are human. You're not, it is a little different. It is a lot different, actually, in the Western point of view, because I know sometimes you might say, oh no, they're crying, don't cry, and go, yes, they're crying, they're moving. It's movement that they need to get out and know that, and they're doing it because they feel safe to do so. So relationship is so important. And yes, I can say, yes, I am an auntie. I am a grandmother. I am a mother. And I have grandchildren your age. Yes, I understand. I hear you. We want them to know that we really hear them. And you will find you really will. And sometimes silence is golden. You'll find that too. So enjoy it, enjoy what you're doing. I really am so grateful that you even consider working with children and youth to help them no matter what their circumstances are. So thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. So another way of understanding it and how we're working in our team is that we're understanding from an Indigenous worldview. And from that view, there's connections everywhere. So everything is relational. So we relate to ourselves, others, earth, spirit, or creator. And balanced health looks like a good connection to oneself, to others, to our environment, and to our spirituality, whatever that might look like. So counseling focuses on these 4 domains especially. And the next big difference that I notice in my work is that there's a focus on cultural aspects of healing. So it's not all just the mental or all just one thing, it's a cultural piece as well. So culture is healing. My work often involves facilitating relationships between people who've been disconnected from their culture to people in community who can help them recover that stolen cultural content. So as a clinician, my job is to make space for people to reclaim, if they wish, these cultural tools. And Indigenous people already have the power. So my job isn't to empower them. My work is to collaborate and unearth what's already been there and what's been there for millennia. So what that can look like is, like I said, a lot of collaboration. So I was super excited today too, because I was going to tell Sunny that our art and culture camp did get approved. Yay! So we will be running that this summer. So that looks like collaborating with people to do different ways of working. So at Indigenous Child and Youth Mental Health, we have Walking with Cookum. So we had a group that was for youth who wanted to meet up with an elder, which was Sunny, and go for walks. And although we didn't get many walks in, Sunny, because of the weather here in Vancouver, is not always open for that. And so Sunny was able to do beading and do canning. And I think we made jam as well, right, Sunny?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And then Sunny is also available for our team to do ceremony with our clients. So I had a young client I was working with, and they'd lost a friend to suicide. So they wanted to commemorate that loss and grieve and spend time with that a year following. So Sunny created a ceremony for this youth to let go. And we gathered in a particular place that was important to this client and their friend. And we had food and song and prayer that Sunny did. And afterwards, the client described feeling very much like they'd let go of some of that grief because they'd made space for it. Mm-hmm. And our program also does Gathering Our Medicine, which is a group created by the scholar Denise Finley, and it is based in Neufeld's work on attachment. And then there's also that cultural piece. So bringing together people, caregivers, to learn more about connecting with their children, connecting with their youth around culture, and finding rituals of being together. What else are we doing? We're doing our art and culture camp this summer. So we're hopefully doing some drum making with some youth. And we also ask communities what they need, right? So we're not walking in and saying I'm a counselor, I know what's good for you. You all need some attachment therapy. We're walking in and saying hey, we're here if you need us. And if you don't, that's okay too. but if you do, you can let us know what you need and we'd help make that work. So we did like a women's group at Catesy, and that was something that they were saying could use a bit of focus. So that's what we did there. Bringing culture into counseling, especially as a settler too, is asking for collaboration, because I can't do those pieces. Those aren't mine to share, right? That's not my knowledge or my culture to share. It also means not taking a pan-Indigenous approach. So when our clients come in, they don't all just get a dream catcher kit or a smudge kit. Instead, we're looking for the individual specific like band, their specific cultural tools that they use in their specific places, because there's so much diversity around, like, for Indigenous people. What we do here in our cities looks different up in Haida Gwaii, I'm guessing, Sunny, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have lots of different things. So like cedar brushing is more common possibly here. So that would be possibly something clients would do. But it's trying to make it as specific as we can. And for some of our clients, they've lost the information. They don't know where they're necessarily from. So it's working to have them connect with someone local who can help share their knowledge, even if it might not be as specific as we'd like it to be. Working with culture is also incredibly experiential. So it looks like having Sunny starts our team meeting every week with a prayer and with a way of grounding us, right? And with a smudge. So that can also look like we've gone to go for a sweat together as a team. We've been invited to ceremony. One of the territories here had a new chief a little while ago, and so we were invited to come to the ceremony to honor that, and we got to see masks that no one has been able to see, like, not that no one has been able to see, but that we've never seen before, and that only come out for this one ceremony. So it was really cool. And many communities are excited to collaborate, but then others are a bit more reluctant, and that totally makes sense. And for some communities, they're not open to that, and that's okay, because they also have their own ways of healing as well, right? So just respecting that, and also taking time, like lots of time, to build trust. So showing face, being around, attending events, a lot of that goes into the counseling as well to build trust. So time and trust. And like I said, Indigenous folks already have a lot of the healing tools that they need. So the reason I love my job in particular is because it involves reconnecting people with those parts of themselves that have been disconnected due to colonization. That's why I love the work I do. Sunny, is there anything else we want to add in terms of cultural aspects that we're doing in our work? Is there anything I forgot?
Well, are we going to go into culture's healing? Is that part of it?
That's part of it. So go for it. If you have something to add, I noticed Dr. Betty's popped in, so I'm guessing we're close to like a question.
Yeah, we are, but we did start late too. So, but I will say just really quickly, culture is healing. And so when you have the opportunity, and I say opportunity, to work with our Indigenous youth, we used to have rites of passage or coming of age ceremonies. When you were 7 years old is the first one, you are no longer a baby. You are getting older there, and they have to grieve that, wow, I am no longer a baby and I'm getting older. And they would have a ceremony during the about 12 years old, especially when the girl has her moon time. It's a celebration, and it probably wouldn't be just them, but whoever else in there, and her friends and that maybe who are having their starting their moon time. We would have another rites of coming of age, and that would be to acknowledge what it is to have your moon time, to do the teachings on how to respect yourself, and then you will respect others, and that it is a time why you have it, and all of the things that go with that. And it was beautiful. It really, really helped our children to know that my body is my body, and it's going to go through whatever changes emotionally, physically, and that it's all normal and it's healthy. And we just walk along beside them to know that they have a good future and how to keep their minds really healthy too during those times. Because as you know, teenagers, probably many of you know, teenagers, their brains changing even, and you just say, it's okay. You'll be okay. Your hormones are just growing all over the place, and you will be okay. And they need to hear that. It's normal to really help them to normalize whatever they are feeling because of what they've experienced. From their experience, it's normal to feel this, and we together, I think you and I and the other eyes, we can really help them to become strong in their minds, strong in their health, in their hearts, and strong physically and spiritually. So thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Sunny.
Well, thank you so much to Carrie and Sunny here. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. It was for me, it was a very intellectually stimulating and mind-opening talk. And I'd love to perhaps turn it over to the audience here. And I think we have time for one or two questions or comments. And so unfortunately, you're live and they're on Zoom. So please do speak loudly and I'll repeat the questions back for them. And we can move on from there. So anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to share? Yes.
I really enjoyed the presentation and the model. And I found this piece on the fact that culture is healing and just reconnecting the aspects of the culture that they are looking for that has been lost in so many years. So I'm wondering if there are like specific examples or like integration with like counseling and psychotherapy, because I noticed a lot of the services are trauma informed and informed by Indigenous worldviews. So I'm trying to picture how those worldviews that come into integration with the counseling and psychotherapy that we learn. And if there's something that's in common or how that
That was a long question. That's okay.
I
No,
wasn't able to catch it all. I think I heard a part of it was how we integrate counseling with that cultural piece. Is that correct?
right.
Yeah.
So I think the originally kind of start with the frame of really appreciating the phrase culture as healing and wanting to maybe hear some examples of how that perspective can be utilized in tandem with counseling or therapy. Is that, yeah. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I think it depends on what philosophical like lens you're working from as a counselor. So I work with narrative therapy a lot. So that is a framework that really fits well in terms of like a worldview of like storing our existence. Some frameworks might not mesh so well with that idea and with that cultural piece. And then again, it's like collaborating. So I'm not able to provide that cultural piece for my clients. I have to have like people in the community who are willing to do those things as well. And it's just bringing it to people as like, you know, a very slight suggestion of like, would you be interested in trying that as something to do like for your health? And people often do want to try, right? And I don't know if I would have anything else to add to that. Sunny, it is tough. I think it is. I will say it's not easy to try to integrate these two pieces because they are sometimes in conflict, right? So it is difficult. Sunny, do you have anything you would add to that in terms of integrating?
But what you can do, being a non-First Nations maybe, is encourage the child, you know, if you see, like say our drum making group, and say, this is for the youth and we really want you to, I think if you would like to, this would be great experience for you, you know, to see what the drum is and how we always use the drum forever and ever and ever and ever, and all other races have too,
Across
by the way.
cultures.
And so and when you do your drum, you know, you will also be able to do a song. You will learn one or two songs that will help you in your walk in life, you know. And you, Carrie, when you had said when you when we got together with that youth who was really hurting for the loss of her friend, and a year had come up, and I said, a year had come up, and he said, okay, and we had food, which we always have food. Everything should have food with it. And my friend came with a song and her drum and a song, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and it touched her heart. And we prayed to Creator, and it made such a difference. And I think she was really, really happy that it had happened, because she was able to let go then. You know, ceremony is healing, and culture is healing, and we can work together. You know, it's almost like a dance that we can work together with to help our youth. So, well, there should hopefully always be an elder or someone who is cultural being able to work with you when you do your work with your Indigenous youth.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question before we run out of time today. Go ahead. And maybe try to project your voice the best you can, and I will repeat as needed.
Yes, well, thank you so much for the talk. I was wondering if you could speak to maybe any common viewpoints that you've noticed among youth who, for themselves and their families, have been so heavily assimilated into the dominant Canadian culture, and what they're coming in with, and maybe how those views might change through the Indigenous framework.
Yeah, I will say there's definitely there's degrees of attachment to culture, right? So some people don't necessarily identify as Indigenous as like their dominant worldview, right? So it is creating like an individual plan. So some people will come and they say, you know, I'm actually not really interested in that cultural piece, and that's okay. So we just respect that as well. And then it's open if they'd like to learn more, because there is that issue of that disconnect, right? Colonization did create, and especially residential schools created that real disconnect. So if we can offer it, we do, but if people don't want to like connect with that part of themselves too, or don't feel connected in any way, that is okay as well.
Great.
I really didn't understand I didn't hear the question clearly, I have to admit, but listening to you, Carrie, and I'd just like to add that, you know, when, and you're right, some of our youth aren't connected. We are all just connecting to who we are. So it really absolutely doesn't surprise me when they say they're not. And I know I've had the opportunity to share that, you know what, in residential school, because of that, they really made us not to want to be Indians. And there I go again, being most politically incorrect. And but I said, and that was their goal, was to take the Indian out of us. But we have something really, really good to share with the world. And maybe it's because we're connected to nature, you know, Mother Nature and everything. And that's where we get our strength from. A lot of our strength comes from our surroundings and being involved with like cedar weaving and things that really not only is good to we use them, but they're also good emotionally and mentally to do these things. And so, and they go, yeah, you're right, I've heard that, you know, and it just helps them to engage or think again, maybe, about saying yay or nay to anything. But yeah, it's wherever they're at, and it is by choice. It has to be by choice, right? And as they go along and maybe go to sweats and everything, you know what? It's just so healing. Culture is healing, and they will see that.
Great. So on that word, culture is healing, I want to let you know something. It was very nice to meet you and hear your story and your wisdom and guidance. It was such a pleasure. So thank you on behalf of the Counseling Psychology program at the University of British Columbia. We thank you so much for being here with us and sharing with us. And thank you to my colleague, Carrie. We co-facilitate groups together. We actually have a group tonight that we'll be co-facilitating. So I will be seeing you this evening But thank you again for taking the time and sharing your experiences and wisdom and knowledge counseling Indigenous individuals as a settler. So again, I
Thank
also
you.
want to send appreciation to the audience here, the people who came out. So thank you so much. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Yes, and please reach out if our emails are up there. If you have any questions or any thoughts of working with Indigenous clients, please reach out and we'll be happy to speak with you more about it. And thank you so much, Dr. Betty, for letting us in. And my hands up to Sunny for letting us be here today. And thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You go for it. I'm so grateful that you want to do what you want to do to help our youth.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.